Hello. In this recording, I'm going to demonstrate the use of math.random to generate random numbers, which could become helpful as we start to work on more interesting programs. We could write things like games or random fortunes or horoscopes or something along those lines. So to do this, we need to understand how math.random works. So simply put, um, there is a math class which contains a number of different math-related methods that we can work with. Math.random is the one we're going to focus on mainly today, but there's also things like seal, which is a round up, floor, which is a round down. There's actually a round as well as some other things like absolute value and so on. But we're going to focus on just math.random. Let me get rid of that. And so the math.random method returns a value from 0 up to 0.99999, and so on, without ever being 1. Okay, it could be 0. It will never be 1. It'll be some decimal within there. So let's check this out a little bit. What I've got is a double variable called random number working. And then later, I'm going to use an integer, just random number. But I want to demonstrate the thought process here first. Now, this may be unfamiliar to you. This is a loop, which in a Java class you will cover, just maybe not yet. I'm using a loop right here just because I want to generate a lot of random numbers to kind of validate that my formula is working correctly. Random can be tricky to debug. So for this example, I'm going to demonstrate generating 50 numbers each time I make an adjustment to my formula. Okay, so if math.random returns a value between 0 inclusive and 1 exclusive, meaning it will never be 1, we should get a list of values that looks sort of like this. Okay, notice that my integer component is never going to be 1, but I get some values that are um, fairly small, 0.04, and potentially up to 0.99. Looks like 0.97 is the highest one I see right here so far. Okay, so that is not necessarily helpful, but with a kind of basic formula, we could tweak this to be something useful. What if I were to multiply that by 6? Consider the boundaries. Well, 0 times 6 would be 0. 0.9999, our highest potential value, times 6 would be 5.999, and so on. It would never be 6 because math.random could not return 1. So if I add a times 6 to my little formula here, and we run this again, now I'll get a range of values from 0 point something up to potentially 5.999. Okay, well, if we're trying to do a die roll, that's not really helpful yet. I need to do two more things. So first of all, it looks like I have the integer portion of these numbers ranging from 0 to 5. Well, what if I were just to add 1 to my result? Remember my order of operations. We're going to generate a random number from 0 up to, but not including 1. Multiply that by 6, which will give me a random number from 0 up to 5.999. Adding 1 to that will give me a random number from 1.0, technically is a possibility, up to 6.99999. Let's try this. Okay, so now if I look through my output, I don't see any zeros. Ooh, I do see a 6, however. So I could tweak this a little bit in a few ways. One way I could do this is to make use of the math.floor method, which is a forced round down. So I can math.floor that result. and then run this. And now if I look at my results, I see 6 appears to be the highest value, 1 appears to be the lowest value. Now, this is pretty close to where I want to be. However, you may recall that double values or float values cannot be guaranteed to be exactly mathematically accurate. And so we probably want to avoid working with doubles and instead work with integers. So what I'm going to do is recreate this formula in a slightly different fashion. As a matter of fact, I'm simply going to comment these out and instead uncomment a separate set of lines, this time making use of my int random number. And here I'm doing a number of things at once. So first of all, I'm once again doing my math.random, which will generate a random value from 0 up to, but not including 1. Multiplying that result by 6 will give me a random value from 0 up to 5.999. Adding 1 to that would give me a random number from 1.0 up to potentially 6.999, which is still not great. But then I'm going to use int to cast or convert that random value again from 0. I'm sorry, at this point it would be from 1 up to 6.999. And the int will convert that result to an integer, dropping any decimal component, not rounding, completely dropping. So let's try this out. I'm going to change, I'm going to bring that up a little bit so we can just scroll nice and slowly through my list of values. And so now I've generated a random number from 1 to 6. I could do other things with that if I wanted to. If I wanted to generate a random number from 2 to 7, I suppose I could do something like uh, plus 1 at the end there. Okay, so I could, maybe simulate, I don't know, cards by, doing 2 through 10, something along those lines. Um, I wanted to generate a value from 1 to 10. I could just multiply by 10. Okay, there we go. Got a 1, got a 10. So I encourage you to use this program to experiment with generating random numbers by yourself. And we will make the source code for this available. But you can, well, especially if I widen my screen just a little bit, you can actually see the entirety of this program. And all you would really need to do to use a random number would be declaring a variable. So like the simplest way of declaring a random number, if I were just to take all the rest of this code out of the equation, we use a multi-line comment. We'll comment this all out. So to simply generate a single random number, you could do something along these lines. We would have to declare a variable. Okay. So this statement would generate a random number from 1 to 10. And then I'm storing it in a variable called random number. And you could do what you wanted with it, use it in a decision structure as part of a game, what have you. And we'll just run this one last time. And so what I'm going to do, oops, illegal startup expression. Oh my. All right. I had left a comment, an extra comment in there. Okay, so I'm going to clean up the source code and I will post this and make this available. But once again, this is maybe the simplest way to generate a random number from 1 to 10. You can just put this somewhere in your program. Or if you wanted to, you could experiment with using some loops to, I'll comment these lines out. And if you wanted to experiment with using um, a loop to, I don't know, check for yourself to see what your random number formula look like, this would do the trick. All right. I hope this video was helpful.